Welcome to the video for the first chapter of the Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit, which is going to teach you how to write Sanskrit. For the longest time, Sanskrit was actually not written down at all. Instead, Sanskrit texts would be memorized and then passed down orally from father to son, from teacher to student, and so on. When many centuries later people did begin writing down Sanskrit, they would do so using a variety of local scripts, meaning whatever script they used for writing down their own everyday spoken language, that they also used for Sanskrit. Nowadays, we find two ways of writing Sanskrit that are predominant. One would be using the Devanagari, which is the script used, for example, for Hindi. And the other is transliteration into Roman script, i.e. into the writing system that we find, for example, used for English. If you want to read any text, any Sanskrit text that is currently available in print, chances are that it will be printed using either the Devanagari or Roman transliteration. And that is the reason why these are the two ways of writing Sanskrit that are also taught in this book. When we look at how English is written, we can see that fundamentally all sounds, i.e. all vowels and all consonants, are represented in the same way. So, for example, in a word such as begin, the sounds b, g, I, and n are each represented by a full letter. However, in English orthography, actually many letters that are written are not pronounced. So, for example, in night, half, or doubt, there's a variety of letters that you find in the writing, so the K, G, H, L, B, and so on, that are not pronounced. Many differently written things are pronounced the same. So, for example, in receive, leave, thief, and between, the E sound is represented in writing in 4 different ways, namely EI, EA, IE, and EE. And conversely, many things that are written identically are pronounced differently. So the combination of OUGH in cuff, through, thorough, bow, and hiccup each time gives us a completely different sound. Now, when you write Sanskrit, on the other hand, all the sounds are always written in the same way, and every written character is always pronounced in the same way, meaning that if you hear a Sanskrit word, you know exactly how to spell it. And if you see a Sanskrit word written down, you know exactly how to pronounce it. So pronunciation of Sanskrit words is completely straightforward. There is one other difference in the writing of Sanskrit and English, and that is that Sanskrit uses a syllabic script, not an alphabet, meaning that the basic building block of the writing system is not a sound, as we had in begin, b, g, I, and n, were the 5 sounds represented by 5 letters. In Sanskrit, what we have is the basic block not being one letter representing one sound, but rather one character representing one syllable. A syllable would consist either of one vowel or one consonant plus one vowel. And I've given you a couple of examples. The Sanskrit signs that you see at the bottom of this slide are a, ta, pa, po, and pu. Each of them counts as one character, and you can maybe already see a little bit how those characters are constructed, but each of them is one character, and one character represents one whole syllable. Chapter 1 of the Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit gives you a list of the Devanagari characters, of their Roman transliterations, and of the sounds that they represent. Your main task in this chapter is to start memorizing and to practice writing these characters. To help you with that, you can use the handouts at the back of the book. You can use the electronic flashcards that are provided on the CIS website. And if you find it helpful, I certainly do, make your own flashcards either out of paper or thin cardboard. Another very helpful resource for learning how to write Devanagari is the website that you see right now. I think the easiest way of getting there is to just Google Hindi Script Tutor. What this website offers is a demonstration of how each single Devanagari character is written. That is the same for Hindi and for Sanskrit, so in that respect this website is perfect for our needs. However, the pronunciation hints are the ones that are correct for Hindi, and given that those diverge, at least in some cases, from those that would be correct for Sanskrit, do please use the pronunciation hints given to you by your teacher and in chapter 1 of this book. But now, finally, let's look at a couple of actual Sanskrit characters and let's look at how to write them. Now, most Sanskrit characters have three elements, what I would call an individual element, a downward stroke, and a line at the top. Some don't have a downward stroke. In the cases of others, the line at the top is interrupted. However, you will find that many of the characters have these three elements. Now, when you want to write them, you should use lined paper and you should write between two lines. And what you should do is you should draw the unique element first. Usually it would be hanging from the top line. You should then draw the downward stroke from top to bottom, going from the top line to the bottom line. And last, you should draw the line at the top, and that's done most easily if you follow the line on the paper. Now, I've done this here with two characters, namely pa and ta, and the arrows indicate the direction in which I write these elements. There are people who write them slightly differently. So, for example, for ta, which is the character on the right, number 1, the individual element, I write it starting at the bottom, going left, then curving, and then going right. There are other people who do it in exactly the opposite direction. Basically, you should do whatever you find easiest for yourself. If you are doing this, if you are learning Sanskrit with a teacher, do what your teacher does. In the end, the main goal is to write letters in such a way that anyone who sees them can identify what letter you were trying to write. What you just saw was how to write individual characters. However, often you will want to combine several characters into words, and what you need to do for that is basically just draw the complete characters with the exception of the top line. And then once you've written all the individual characters, you, in the end, use the top line to connect all of them. Some people can do that freely, others use rulers, and I've actually seen quite a few of my students just use their mobile phones because they didn't have a ruler handy. Now, at this point of the video, if you wanted to, you could pause and go to the list of characters either in the book or on the Script Tutor website and look at a few characters, practice writing a few of them, practice recognizing a few of them, and so on. Or if you want to continue with the video, what we're going to look at next is some of the systematics of how the Devanagari works. So, on to some of the principles and systems of how to write Sanskrit. Now, short a is the most frequent vowel in Sanskrit. And in Sanskrit writing, the representation of a is actually really clever. Its presence is implied whenever a consonant is written. So, the sign that you found for ta, for pa, basically is the sign for t or p, or whichever other consonant you want to write. And if you don't indicate anything else behind it, you have to automatically assume that this consonant is followed by the vowel short a. This is a very economical way of writing because a is so frequent, and if you sort of take it as the default case, so if you say that if nothing else is indicated, assume short a, you are just saving a lot of time writing, you're saving a lot of space. However, Sanskrit has many other vowels than just short a, and these of course need to be written down as well. So if you want to write a vowel other than short a after a consonant, what you need to do is write the consonant sign first, and then add the vowel sign either above, below, after, or actually even in front of the consonant sign. So in the table that you can see here, we first have ka, that is basically just the consonant sign. Because nothing else is indicated, we have the consonant k followed by the vowel short a. If, however, I indicate, if I write, a downward stroke towards the right of this consonant sign for k, then what I have is ka. So that downward stroke on the right of the consonant indicates a long a. If I had a different consonant sign, if I had the ta from above or the pa from just a little while ago, instead of the sign for the k, then it would be exactly the same. Without any other indication, I would be looking at ta, ka, pa, and so on. With the line on the right, I am looking at ta, ka, pa, and so on. Same holds for all the other vowels, which are I, U, R, L, E, I, O, and OW. So I, short I, is written by means of a downward stroke and a curvy line on the top. The downward stroke, however, is in front of the consonant sign. So even though it is in front of the consonant sign, to the left of the consonant sign, this I is pronounced behind, is pronounced after the consonant. So this is something that is probably going to stump you for a little while. Or if it doesn't, then be really proud of yourself, because many Sanskrit students stumble over this. So a line in front of the consonant sign and a curvy line over the consonant sign is the indication for I after a consonant. So here we have ki. Then coming up next is I, indicated with a downward stroke after, so to the right of the consonant, combined with a curvy line on the top. So here that gives us ki. And again, if instead of the k sign I had a different consonant sign, I would then have pi, ti, and so on. The signs for u and u are added below the sign, below the consonant sign. So here we have ku and ku. Then we have kr and kr. These are what we call vocalic R's. You will see when you encounter more Sanskrit words what the difference is between a vocalic or a vowel R and a regular consonant R. Then we have L also functioning as a vowel. So we have kl and kl. Now the thing is that kl, the long vocalic L, actually doesn't exist. It is used in, or it is given in these lists of vowels because that makes them look more balanced, more complete, makes them look nicer. However, you won't actually find that in any Sanskrit word. Then we have ke, kai, ko, and cow. Finally, and these are not actually vowels, but they are represented in the same way as Sanskrit vowels, are kach and kan. So if you have something colon-like after a consonant, it creates a ch sound. So that's like a German ach sound, or the sound that you get in Scottish loch. But there isn't really a good or a proper correspondent in English, in UK English or US English. You can either think of it as a strong h sound, or what some people do is, rather than pronounce it as a h sound, they just pronounce it as an h and then add an echo of the preceding vowel to it. So this could be pronounced kach or it could be pronounced kah. You will find either pronunciation. And then lastly, if you have a dot on the consonant sign, very often on the in the top right-hand corner of the consonant sign, that then indicates a nasalization. So rather than having ka, so k plus the vowel short a, we have k plus nasalized short a, meaning kan. You can combine this dot with any other vowel sign, so you can have kan, king, kong, and so on. If you want to write just a consonant, then what you need to do is add a small diagonal line, a so-called virama, sometimes you will also find it called halanta, to the bottom of the consonant. Wherever possible, it will be added at the bottom end of the downward stroke of the consonant. So here you have ta contrasted with t. See that little stroke, that little diagonal at the bottom? Ka with k, pa with p, and so on. If, on the other hand, you have a consonant that is followed not by a vowel, not by nothing, but actually followed directly by another consonant, what you need to do is to combine the two consonant signs in writing. Because remember, if you give just the consonant sign in itself, that is assumed to be the consonant plus the vowel short a. So if you need to write two consonants right next to each other and therefore need to combine the two consonant signs in writing, one very frequent way of doing that is to remove the downward stroke of the first consonant and then to move the remains of the consonant closer to the next consonant. So, for example, if I have the word maṇḍalaḥ, which means circle, in English it's usually pronounced maṇḍala, but let me tell you that's wrong, then I could theoretically write my n as the consonant n plus that little diagonal stroke, the virama that we just encountered. But that's usually not done inside a word. You will find that used just at the end of a word. So instead, inside a word, what is done is that the downward stroke at the right-hand side of the sign for n is simply removed, and then what remains of the n is moved closely to the sign for the d. And so you get d, and that you can then just use in a word such as maṇḍalaḥ, meaning circle. Similarly, in the next line with t, you could write it as the full consonant sign with the virama, but usually that's not done inside a word. So instead, you remove the downward stroke and you move what's left of the t right next to the letter or to the character for m. So there you get the combination of tm that you get, for example, in words such as atma, meaning the soul or the self. You can do this also with more than two consonants. So, for example, in the word mahatmyam, which means magnanimity or great-souledness, great-heartedness, you would take the t, remove the downward stroke. You would take the m, remove the downward stroke. Move both of these closer to each other and also closer to the next consonant, the y, giving you tmya, and that you would then find in mahatmyam. If you want to combine two consonants, but you cannot move characters together sideways, then you can simply stack them on top of each other. So I've given you a couple of examples here. If you have two Ks, for example, in the word for dog, which is kukkurach, then the two Ks would simply be stacked on top of each other. If you have dma, then you do the same thing. You move them closer together sideways, but also one on top of the other. And the first consonant, the one that's pronounced first, will be the upper one. The one that's pronounced second will be the lower one. Similarly with d plus bh. Here you can see that the bh isn't written just smaller, but actually it's indented a little bit. It's put diagonally, it's put at an angle, because otherwise they would just be too small in writing. You wouldn't be able to recognize them. I've given you a couple of other examples. Dya. Dya is actually really annoying because it's a little difficult to recognize this new combination of consonants, this new conjunct consonant. N plus na, giving you nna, and p plus ta, giving you pta. Ta is a very nice example of consonants that are actually just very straightforwardly stacked on top of each other. Now, at the moment, that may all seem rather complicated and rather difficult. However, believe me, if you are familiar with the basic consonants, and you will soon be, then you will be able to recognize most of the conjuncts. Also, there is a list of all the conjuncts at the end of the book that you can use for reference. And the few conjuncts that do need separate introduction, that you unfortunately cannot just recognize even if you know all the basic consonants, will be looked at right now. For example, if you want to write an R before another consonant, you do that by using a small hook that you put above that following consonant, or more specifically, you put it not just above, but you put it in the top right-hand corner above the following consonant or above the following syllable. So, for example, in the word Arjuna, which is a name, the little hook that you see above the connector line at the top of the word indicates this R. Then the consonant that follows this R is a J, and underneath that we see the vowel U. So we have Rju in the middle of the word Arjuna. sometimes this R actually has to compete for space with other things. So, for example, in the next word, duryogach, which means crime, we have this little hook, again, above that connector line at the top of the word. And the consonant that follows the R is Y, so we have R-Y. But the vowel that follows after the Y is an O, and an O is written by means of a downward stroke, and on top of that downward stroke you have this one rabbit ear. And this rabbit ear, which is also above the main line, and the hook that indicate the R compete for space. And this is sometimes a little confusing, but the way that you need to read this is the R first. The hook indicates an R before another consonant. So you read the R first, then you read the other consonant, the consonant underneath, which is Y, and then you read the sign for the O, which is the vowel that follows the Y. So R-yo in dur-yogach, crime. Now, if you want to indicate an R after another consonant, you do that by adding a small diagonal line to the lower half of the adjacent consonant. So, for example, in krodach, which means anger, we have our sign for k, but added to that, we have this little diagonal in the bottom left-hand corner, which means that we don't have k, but we've got kr, and the vowel that follows this is an O. And so once again we have the downward stroke and the one rabbit ear on top. So that gives us crow, followed by dach. You can spot that same little diagonal line in the next word, in the first syllable. We have bra-ta with the sign for b, with that little diagonal line in the bottom half, making it not b but br. And then the downward stroke behind it indicates the vowel a. So here we have bra. And sometimes we have this little diagonal stroke not on the side, not next to the consonant, but actually inside the consonant, as for example in atra, which means here. And there you have the sign just for the normal t. And inside that sign for the t, we have this little diagonal stroke again, which indicates an r. So we've got tr. And there isn't anything else indicated after this, and so we have to assume that this is followed by the vowel a, therefore giving us tra. So the whole word is atra. Then finally, if you have a sh before at least some other consonants, this will be indicated by means of a small loop in the top left-hand corner of this new conjunct consonant. So for example, in the word ashwach, we have this little loop, and underneath we have the oval that indicates the w, and then the downward stroke that also belongs to the w, and so we have ashw, ashwach. You can find that same little loop on top of the sign for ch in the word paschat, which means after, and you can find that same little loop combined with the small diagonal line that is used to indicate an R after another consonant in this next word, which is shri, which means beautiness or happiness, beauty or happiness. And so again, you have the small loop on top, and then you have the small diagonal stroke at the bottom, and that gives you shri, and that is followed by the indication or by the sign for the long vowel E. So we have shri. And as though we didn't already have enough, there are 4 more signs that indicate 2 consonants, not one, but a combination of 2 consonants. And these are the signs for ksha, jnya, tt, and kt. The kt in the font that we will be using in this book is actually quite legible. However, in many other fonts, this will appear as a sign that on its own isn't recognizable. So even if you know the signs for k and t, or if you know the signs for k and sh, j and ny, and so on, even if you know those, you will not be able to recognize those conjunct consonants. And so what you need to do is basically whatever you did to memorize the individual consonants, that you should also do in order to memorize these new 4 conjunct consonant signs. Congratulations, you have made it to the end of the video for the first chapter. Now, if you're a little overwhelmed by all this new information, I seriously cannot blame you because yes, it is a lot. However, don't worry. Even though it is a lot of information to memorize, you have time. You don't need to be fluent in reading Devanagari until chapter 8, because in chapters 2 to 7, transliteration will be used alongside the Devanagari at all times. when you do go ahead and memorize all this information, pace yourself. Don't do more than, say, 10 new characters per day, or on a busy day, no more than 5 new characters on that day. You have a variety of resources that you can use. For example, flashcards, whether your own or those linked to on the book website. You can use the handouts at the back of the book. You can use the Avashi Hindi script tutor. And something that some of my younger students have been teaching me, you can make lots and lots of mnemonics. So, for example, as was pointed out to me by an 11-year-old, the sign for ga, or rather the individual bit in the sign for ga, looks a little bit like a golf club. So, ga looks like a golf club. This may also help you remember that the g in Sanskrit is always a hard g, as in golf, and never a soft g, i.e. pronounced as a j, as in, for example, jinn or gender or other words in English. In English, the sign for g can represent two sounds, g and j. In Sanskrit, it always represents the sound that we find at the beginning of golf. Similarly, the letter for a can be taken apart into the number 3 and a capital T, and they're connected by a little line. If you find mnemonics like this helpful, use them. Come up with your own. But every brain works differently, so if you don't find mnemonics helpful, don't worry about them, don't bother with them. It's basically up to you. Do whatever you find helps you memorize the Devanagari best. Good luck and have fun.